slavery. He was jerking off by the fire when a gang of Sapiens stormed the cave. They grabbed him, tied his hands behind his back, and hauled him out like a sack of meat. He was dragged to a camp and immediately tossed into a log pen, high enough to make any escape attempt a suicide mission. "I'm screwed," he thought in his ancient tongue. Outside the pen, 2 guards kept a close watch on him. The first was tapping a club against his palm like a nightstick. The second had an arrow notched and ready to fly. After a while, they hauled him out and marched him down a trail of frozen mud. The knots around his wrists were so tight they were impossible to pick. For a second, he thought about lunging at the first guard and ripping out his jugular with his teeth, but the fear of a broadhead in his back held him back. Then he thought about diving at the second guard and caving in his skull with a headbutt. But the fear of getting his brains turned to mush by a club stopped him cold. At the end of the trail was a clearing in the trees. In this clearing stood a nasty-looking bearded thug. Cold, ruthless eyes. 4 other guys stood around him. 1 was tall, the other 3 were short. 2 of them were missing almost all their teeth, and 3 out of the 4 were skin and bones. Their bellies poked out from under their furs, and their wrinkled faces gave away a very premature old age. The bearded thug had long hair, just like 3 of the others, while the youngest of the bunch wore his short. They all shared the same dark skin, thick lips, and savage stares. "This is gonna end badly," the Neanderthal thought. The bearded thug pulled the hilt of a dagger from the fire. The flint tip was glowing red-hot, bluish and shimmering. A look of vague surprise crossed the Neanderthal's face, slowly turning into pure horror. Meanwhile, the 4 men surrounded him and jumped him to pin him down. The Neanderthal tried to thrash around, but he was overpowered. Once the branding was done, the guards escorted him back to that sinister log pen. On his right cheek, an upside-down V was burned into his skin. The brand was jagged and deep, like the red-hot tip had been pressed in for way too long. In the days that followed, he spent most of his time working nonstop. The guards never cut him any slack. They watched him like hawks, step by step. Every day he got weaker. He was afraid his body wouldn't hold out much longer. More work, harder labor, less food, just scraps. His vision started to blur. He would stumble, moaning, with spit dripping from his mouth. Sometimes they'd toss him a water snake. They'd watch as he twisted its head off and ate the damn thing raw. One fine day, while he was chopping wood, they let him stop to pick some wild berries and eat them. Later, he felt sharp cramps in his gut. He ripped a fart and shat out a soupy mess. By nightfall, he lay motionless inside the pen. He was covered in shit. He could hear the guards laughing at how dumb he was, but he wasn't as big of a moron as he looked. See, he'd given himself that diarrhea on purpose. He'd eaten just enough berries to catch a mild case of the runs, so that the next day he could fake cramps even worse than they were and collapse while working. Maybe then they'd think he was a goner. Maybe the guards would ditch him in the woods to go find another poor bastard to replace him, and in the meantime he could make a break for it. Hard to believe, but everything went according to plan. The scheme worked like a charm. The Neanderthal went charging out of the woods, scrambling down a slope. Someone fired an arrow at him. He hit the dirt face first. He stayed dead still. "Missed me by a hair," he thought. Another arrow whistled through the air. People running through the trees. The crunch of footsteps on the snow. "Get up and say who you are," said a man with a face wrinkled like a baked apple. He recognized the language immediately. His heart started pounding harder and harder. "Neanderthals," he burst out laughing. He couldn't stop.